Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going deep into Guyanese politics and development.
Okay.
Our main source is this YouTube video. It features Attorney General Anil Nandlall.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and he kind of gives a first-hand look at what's going on.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it is. It really is. So we're going to cover land titling, new infrastructure, and even take a peek into the current political battles.
Wow. A lot to unpack.
Yeah, there is a lot. So Nandlall talks about this huge land titling initiative.
Yeah.
Like over 200 families in Walton Hall just got titles for the first time.
Wow.
And there are similar things happening in other areas, West Coast Burbus, Essequibo, even along the Pomeroon River.
Yeah, that's pretty unique. I mean, most governments don't really get involved like that.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that it seems like they're trying to support land ownership in these communities.
Right. Land ownership in Guyana, it has these deep historical roots going way back to colonial times.
Oh.
Yeah, it was really tied to power structures back then. So this push for titling could be a huge deal for these communities.
Yeah, definitely.
Not just for economics, but also kind of addressing those historical inequalities.
It must feel amazing for those families to finally have those titles.
Yeah.
I mean, just imagine that sense of ownership and security.
I know.
But it makes me wonder about the challenges involved.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
How do they even start mapping and verifying land rights, especially in those really remote areas?
Yeah, it's a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about customary land rights, informal settlements,
Right.
and making sure it benefits those who've been marginalized.
Right.
It's about fairness.
It is. So Nandlall also mentions these infrastructure projects,
Okay.
specifically a new deeds and commercial registries authority building in Essequibo
Got it.
and a magistrate's court in Friendship, which is on the east bank of Demerara.
Interesting.
Big investments, too, $447 million and $388 million Guyanese dollars.
Wow. So they're definitely serious about modernizing public services.
It seems that way.
I mean, a well-equipped deeds registry streamlines property transactions, attracts investment,
Makes sense.
and, reduces potential disputes.
Yeah,
Accessible courts, too. Those are crucial for upholding the rule of law.
definitely. Everyone needs access to justice.
Right. It shouldn't matter where you live.
Okay, this is where things get interesting. Nandlall talks about all these social programs that the government's rolling out.
Okay.
A $100,000 baby grant, a $10,000 medical checkup grant, an $8,000 subsidy for cervical cancer testing,
Wow.
and even an increased income tax threshold. It's like a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, it seems like they're really trying to improve citizens' lives on multiple levels.
Exactly. He makes it sound pretty good.
Well, of course.
But he mentions that the opposition's not happy.
Yeah, that's politics for you.
He calls them desperate and irrelevant, clinging to any issue to criticize.
Yeah, he even uses this phrase, the Mohammed's issue.
I know, I was a little confused by that.
Me too.
Sounds like there's more to that story.
Yeah, a whole backstory we're missing.
But you can definitely feel the tension.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So what are they criticizing?
Well, Nandlall specifically mentions their criticism of those cash grants. He says they're focusing on small glitches instead of the big picture.
Right.
Basically, he's saying they're just trying to distract from the government's successes.
Trying to control the narrative.
Right. It's like progress versus obstruction. But how much of that is just political posturing?
Good question. To really understand, we need to look at the history between the ruling party and the opposition.
Okay.
See what divides them and how they try to win over the public.
Like a political thriller?
It kind of is. But before we go there, Nandlall talks about this lawsuit.
Filed against him and the senior minister of finance,
Okay.
someone named Taryn Campbell.
Got it.
And he really goes after this lawsuit, calling it politically motivated and a misuse of the courts.
Oh, wow.
Like it's all about headlines and not about justice.
Yeah, he's basically saying that Campbell's trying to use the courts to undermine the government.
Exactly. And he even brings up this idea of separation of powers.
Right.
It's a big deal. For those of us who aren't lawyers, can you break that down?
Sure. Basically, it means the government is divided into three branches:
Okay.
legislative, executive, and judicial,
Got it.
each with its own powers and responsibilities. Prevents anyone from having too much power.
Makes sense. So Nandlall's saying this lawsuit is crossing those boundaries.
Exactly. He sees it as Campbell trying to use the judicial branch to interfere with the executive branch.
That's pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, he thinks it threatens the balance of power and undermines the rule of law.
We've gone from land titles to political maneuvering to a potential constitutional crisis.
It's all connected.
It is. And on that note, we'll wrap up part one of our deep dive into Guyana's developments and political landscape.
Okay.
I've laid the groundwork, but there's a lot more to uncover.
I'm ready when you are. Feels like we're in one of those political dramas.
Yeah, with all the legal battles and accusations flying around.
Right.
And Nandal's like the main character fighting back against all these attacks.
Uh-huh.
He even compares life in Guyana to the U.S. and Canada,
Really?
saying that they're reaching similar levels of economic progress.
That's a bold claim.
Yeah. He talks about increased spending power, the clothes people wear, the cars they drive. Trying to show that Guyana's on the rise, shedding its past.
Okay, but is everyone experiencing that prosperity?
Yeah, that's the question.
Like, is he just telling one side of the story?
Right. Highlighting the good stuff.
And maybe glossing over the struggles some people are still facing.
Because even though Guyana's economy is growing,
Yeah, with all that oil money.
it doesn't mean that everyone's benefiting equally.
Right, economic growth doesn't always trickle down to everyone.
And that brings us back to the politics of it all.
Yeah.
Because Nandal spends a lot of time focusing on what he sees as the opposition's hypocrisy,
Okay.
especially when it comes to economics.
Like, what's he saying?
He contrasts the current government's policies
Okay.
with what the previous administration did.
Which was led by the opposition, right?
Yeah, and
Yep.
he talks about the increase in the income tax threshold and the reduction in income tax rates
Okay.
and all those social programs we talked about.
Right, the baby grant, the medical checkup grants.
It's like he's saying, look at all the good we're doing.
Yeah.
While they were just burdening people with taxes and cutting programs.
It's a pretty clear message.
Yeah, he reminds listeners that the previous government implemented over 200 tax measures
Wow, 200.
and even cut a bunch of social programs.
Like what kind of programs?
A cash grant for children, a one laptop per family thing, subsidies for pensioners, support for community service officers in Amerindian communities.
So he's really painting them as reckless.
Right, and trying to show that his government is responsible.
Okay, but how true is all that?
Yeah, were those policies really that bad?
Or is he just spinning things to make himself look good?
It's hard to say.
Yeah, we need to look at the data, the impact of those policies.
There's
again.
context, too.
Right, because politicians love to simplify complex issues.
Yeah, and it's our job to look beyond the sound bites.
And try to get the full story.
Speaking of political tactics, what about that Mohammed's issue?
Oh, yeah, he keeps mentioning it.
But never really explains what it is.
Right, like what is it?
Maybe a political faction within the opposition?
Could be.
Or some kind of strategy they're using.
Maybe it's a code word?
I don't know. It's like a missing puzzle piece.
It's interesting that he doesn't explain it.
Makes you wonder if he's doing it on purpose.
Yeah, to make people curious.
And fill in the blanks themselves.
Ambiguity can be a powerful tool in politics.
For sure. Okay. Let's switch gears a bit.
Okay.
And go back to those social programs.
Right.
I'm thinking about the potential impact on healthcare.
Yeah, those programs could be huge.
Like that medical checkup grant?
Could encourage people to get preventative care.
Exactly. Catch health problems early.
And that cervical cancer testing subsidy.
Could lead to earlier diagnosis.
And better outcomes for women.
Right. Those are real, tangible benefits.
But what about the long term?
Yeah. Are these programs sustainable?
Are they just for now or part of a bigger plan to improve the whole healthcare system?
It's a question of priorities.
Yeah. Could those funds be used differently?
Like investing in infrastructure.
Training healthcare workers.
Addressing systemic problems.
These are the tough decisions every government has to make.
Right. Finding that balance between addressing immediate needs.
And investing in the future.
It feels like Guyana is at this crossroads.
Yeah, navigating all these complex issues.
Development politics, social welfare. Yeah, it really feels like Guyana is on the verge of something big.
Like a turning point.
Yeah, this sense of excitement about all the possibilities.
But also anxieties about what could go wrong.
Right. It's like a global story these days.
Countries dealing with rapid change.
Maybe wealth.
And figuring out how to make sure everyone benefits.
So what does all this mean for Guyana long term? I mean, what kind of nation are they trying to build?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've seen how the oil money is driving development. But economic growth doesn't automatically fix everything.
No, it doesn't. Nan Lal talks about all this progress, but I keep wondering, is it the whole picture? Or are there problems we're not seeing?
It's like, are there cracks beneath the surface?
Exactly. How will they manage all this new wealth responsibly?
Will they protect the environment?
Make sure development doesn't increase inequality.
A tough balance.
Yeah, a real tightrope walk.
They need to think about the long term.
Not just short-term gains.
And it's not just the government. It's everyone.
Communities, businesses, individuals,
all making choices that shape the future.
a future that needs to be sustainable.
Equitable and just.
And those choices are being made right now.
Yeah, these are critical moments.
This brings up another point. We talked about access to justice.
Right.
But what about access to information?
That's crucial, especially now with so much change happening.
And all these different narratives about progress.
People need reliable information to make informed decisions.
It makes me think about that lawsuit against Nan Law. He says it's just politics.
But is there more to it? Are there legitimate concerns being ignored?
That's where critical thinking comes in.
Right, figuring out who to trust.
How to get a balanced perspective.
This is so important in a democracy.
Especially one going through so much change.
For sure.
This deep dive has been fascinating.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Land titling,
Infrastructure.
social programs,
Even the legal system.
and through it all, this underlying tension.
Yeah, the excitement of opportunity mixed with uncertainty about the future.
It's a powerful combination.
So as we wrap up, what's one final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I'd say this Guyana is at a crossroads. The decisions they make today will have a huge impact on their future. It's a time of enormous potential, but also a time of great responsibility.
Well said. It's easy to forget that these aren't just political debates. They affect real people's lives.
Absolutely. This is a story that deserves our attention.
We need to stay informed and engaged.
And keep asking questions. So keep exploring these topics, seek out different perspectives, and join the conversation about Guyana's future. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.